In this next session here in the Debussy Theatre, we'll hear from some of the world's leading sports marketers about how athletes and brands can unite to make the world a better place. So please welcome now to the stage the Chief Marketing Officer of the NBA, Pam Eel, the Chief Marketing Officer of the NFL, Dawn Hudson, the founder and CEO of Translation, Steve Stout, and the Wall Street Journal's advertising reporter, Alexandra Bruel. Big round of applause, please.
You told me there was music.
We need you now. Come on.
We were going to do one of these. There's no music. Let's get sophisticated.
Hi, everyone. So today we are going to talk about how brands and athletes can change the world. The U.S. is more divided than ever. Brands are emboldened to use their advertising for social causes, to promote social causes, and athletes too are using their own social platforms to promote their own causes and to promote their own points of views. So what does that mean? What does this environment mean for the relationship between brands and athletes? How has that relationship changed? What's the opportunity for the leagues to really take charge and use this environment to create more social good? And lastly, what are some of the challenges that brands, athletes, and leagues face when they mix promotion, marketing, and passion? It's not always pretty. So lots to talk about, and let's start broad. Let's start with the leagues and talk about why we're even here. Why are we talking about this now? Why are brands more emboldened? Why are athletes more emboldened? And what's the opportunity for the leagues? Pam, why don't we start with you?
I think given the subject of the empowerment of leagues and athletes, this, by the way, I think is the best time ever to be in sports. As a female CMO, Dawn believes that as well. It's the best time ever for us to be in these roles. Leagues and athletes these days are empowered to do what they think is best. It hasn't always been that way. Athletes didn't always take their voice and do what they wanted to do with their voices. But nowadays, you see that happening all the time. And leagues take that very seriously. We encourage that with the athletes, and we try to help our athletes find their voices in the social space, find their voices in marketing spaces. If you think about the athletes of today, let's just take an athlete. Let's say LeBron James. That's just a name that comes to mind. Hello. LeBron knows his brand. He knows what he's doing every step of the way. 10, 15, 20 years ago, I would say that wasn't the case with an athlete. But because he understands his brand and we understand our brand, it's a marriage made in heaven. And we know it's only good for us for him to do well. So I think that's why it works these days.
And John, what's the NFL's opportunity here? I mean, the NFL has been under pressure and has, been in headlines. Really? I know, it's shocking. So, concussions, domestic abuse over the years. I mean, now you're doing a lot of good too. I mean, how are you changing the tone? How are you changing the reputation of the NFL through this opportunity?
Thanks. It's a great question. I think that, let me step back. First, say that athletes, from a brand standpoint, one, I think it's a great time to be an athlete. And I think athletes are realizing that they can have voice. And I think back to my days being a CMO of other companies. The athlete is closer, I would say, to the consumer. In my case, the fan. They're on the field. They're on the court. They're interacting. And so it's a more personal connection, I think, in some ways they have than celebrities. They're able to reach out and touch. So I think they can have great impact. And I think they're understanding that when they are a professional athlete, even when they're in college, they have an opportunity to tell a story. And I do believe that the athletes at the NFL are a little bit behind the NBA in their understanding. And I think that stems from the fact that they wear helmets and they're part of big teams and they just don't have the visibility, though they're clearly starting to. Now, what we've tried to do is partner and really listen to our athletes, because they actually came to us and said, we do such good in the community. Most of our athletes have great philanthropic things they do in the community, whether they started them or they joined with something. and they're very local, and they wanted to use the platform of the NFL to get national visibility. And so last year, in partnership with them, we created a platform called My Cause, My Cleats, where players could go on the Players Tribune site, tell their story, and then on a weekend wear a cleat that showed what they were involved in. And this was really important because, as opposed to the big brand of the NFL telling them what to do and trying to get 1,800 athletes to all agree on something, this was much better for our fans and for them, because it said, let you be you, and you can all have a different point of view and a different voice. And it is actually the collective power and the power of an individual that's even greater than a brand. That's what's important for the brand of the NFL.
Is this new that athletes are proactively coming to the league and coming to, maybe brands and saying, hey, here, I feel strongly about this, let's do something about it together? I mean, typically, isn't it the league or isn't it the brand coming to the athlete saying, hey, we want you to endorse our brand and our cause? Is this something new? Steve, you're close to the athletes. Why don't you talk a little bit about this?
It's changed over the last 20 years. It's changed dramatically, where whether it be musicians or athletes, they've actually said, well, although I'm part of the NBA and I'm part of the NFL, I'm also a brand myself, and I have brand values, and I have to do things that accentuate my brand values. And social media and all of the digital tools that exist have allowed them to articulate those brands. That's a gigantic shift over time. Is this mic right? I'm hearing a lot of feedback. Yeah. So anyhow, I think that shift is the reason why you're seeing athletes much more state up front what they will stand for, what they won't stand for, and it could not have been highlighted more than this election. This election, you got a chance to see athletes for the first time take very radical approaches, outspoken approaches. Didn't make a difference if the owner of the team felt a certain way. Didn't make a difference if the league felt a certain way. They were protecting their brand, whether it be showing up to the White House or getting on one knee or wearing I Can't Breathe hoodies. Like, they wouldn't do that before.
How does that affect the relationship with the brand? Brands have worked with athletes for a long time, and endorsement deals are important for brands. What does that mean? Do they have less control?
Well, yeah. Well, it's funny. Just like the entire consumer landscape is really odd right now, and it's tough on brands, because the brands, the consumer that brands desire are the ones that are diametrically opposed to the country's political point of view, right? So the point of view that would be what put the president in place or put politics in place, that consumer doesn't have a lot of effect on government policy, but they have a tremendous effect on commercialism. So what are you gonna do? Are you gonna pick the consumer and side with the consumer, or are you gonna side with the politics? And Kevin Plank found himself in that situation and got clipped.
I think another way to think about it is athletes are so smart. They are smart enough to pick brands that represent their values. And the one that I think about, the brand that I think about is Nike. And I think about LeBron and the other Nike athletes. And I think about, so I was representing a brand when LeBron went through his issue going to Miami from Cleveland. And he took a lot of crap for making that move. Nike stood behind him when he made that move, and not only said, I'm going to support him, but also just got in all of our faces about the way they were going to support him. So athletes choose and stay with brands that are going to be supportive of them and their causes. I think about the ESPYs when CP3 and Melo and D Wade and LeBron were on the ESPYs this past year and took that stand for us becoming a real part of the community and us meaning individuals doing our parts in communities. They knew that the brands they represented were going to back them. And by the way, if they didn't, they could find another brand that would. They also knew that the league was going to support that because they came down on the side of right. And I think as long as the athletes are doing what many of them are doing now, which is, I have values and I'm going to stand for those values, regardless of what happens on the financial side with a brand, those brands are likely to follow. And if they don't, they'll find someone else that will.
And that's, you know, it seems to me that athletes have a lot more power now to select the brands that who are going to pay them to endorse their products and to be part of their causes. You know, how are these alignments now coming together in this kind of environment where there's been a shift in the balance of power? Don, you have to cater to, you know, all of America. Football is such an iconic American brand. Surely you have to be careful when you select causes, you know, and, you know, brands and athletes need to be more careful now when they select each other. Let's talk about how the league selects causes, and then next I'd love to hear from Steve about how these, you know, relationships are coming to be, but let's start with the leagues.
In fact, we work closely with Steve on this issue. I think the thing that I have to keep in mind is the difference between a league, which is a passion point for millions and millions of fans, in our case 170 million in the US and 140 million outside the US. There's a lot of things that are common to them in a lot of sports, and there's a lot of personal beliefs that are very, very different. So I think the brand of the NFL needs to stand for its values of inclusion, of mutual respect, of resiliency, and that can encompass many, many different points of view, but not, you know, honestly let individual players form with partnerships with individual brands to make statements, and we allow them to have voice to that, but to have the NFL be someone that celebrates the breadth of point of view as opposed to tries to align with one or the other, because with, you know, almost, 7 out of 10, you know, Americans being fans of the NFL, we just have to be careful to be inclusive.
And, you know, as you take advantage of that, there's an opportunity to have this platform to promote inclusiveness. You know, how do you deal with a Colin Kaepernick? You know, is that good for the NFL's brand, or is that bad for the NFL's brand? Here you want to give the athletes the opportunity to be themselves, to have a voice, to protest, but is something like that's, you know, beloved by many, but also controversial, you know, according to others, good or bad for the NFL?
Well, first of all, you know, there are many of our fans that took what he did as anti-American, anti-military, and you know, we're a big military appreciation organization. So, but we actually came out and instead said we believe in freedom of speech, and you should be able to stand up. We're a country built by a whole variety of people thinking that we can make things better by having a point of view. So that was our first and foremost approach. What happened is some actually aligned and did the same thing, and others said, I'm going to have a different way to have impact. And in fact, many of our teams ended up having local meetings with police community to try to figure out how to locally impact. And I think what was important for the NFL is to say, we believe in freedom of speech, we believe in athletes trying to make a difference and being able to have voice and have impact. And then that very much led to a platform for us to help give our athletes more national voice. That's very different than the NFL saying, you know, I have this point of view, this point of view, this point of view, this point of view. You know, we won't get agreement, but what we can do is say that we respect differences of opinion, we respect diversity of opinion, but we're inclusive. And in the end, the sport of football is a passion point that brings people of many, many different points of view and backgrounds together. And we celebrate actually that unity. And that was the spot we had. The teamwork on the field that is the unity that happens in our fan base. And Steve, in translation, did that spot.
So opportunity,
how's that for a
in other words.
That's cool.
Steve, so how do brands and athletes come together in today's world, in today's environment? What's different, you know, compared to a few years ago in terms of, you know, alignment, brand deciding to work with the athlete, athlete deciding to work with brands?
I think brands have become much more flexible in understanding that the criteria that used to apply many years ago on who they would partner with has had to shift, because if it didn't shift, they were going to not necessarily be able to attract talent that would make a change. I've always felt from day one, if you were going to get a spokesperson or get aligned with somebody, the number one thing had to be that you guys shared certain values. There were values that you both uniquely felt the same way about, and that's why that partnership would be believed by the consumer and why it would make sense. You see brands all the time make bad decisions, write big checks for things that don't make sense, partner with people that don't really wear it or believe in it or represent the values, and those relationships fail. The artist brands and the athlete brands today, they know for a fact they move culture. If you speak to some of these athletes in the NFL, they know for a fact they move culture. And if a brand wants to partner with them, they're going to have to partner with them on the conditions that they can remain who they were before they got into the deal.
That they'll have less control, in other words.
They're going to remain who they are before they got into the deal. You see, what happens is when a brand does a deal with an athlete, and the athlete does the thing that they've always done, but then all of a sudden the brand goes, wait a minute, we have to let them go because there's some political pressure. You know who looks bad?
Who?
The athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the athlete's like, what are you talking about? You wrote me that check when you already knew that. I've seen this happen in music all the time. Like, they do a deal with an artist, and the artist uses the same lyrics that they got the deal with again, and then they lose the deal because it's like all of a sudden they heard them use a phrase that, like, they didn't expect. Like, didn't you read the lyrics before you signed the check?
Yeah.
So is that coming up in conversations when these deals are coming together? Is that coming up earlier now in those initial conversations?
It's coming up early, and you're seeing a lot of confidence from the athlete walking in saying, this is who I am, and like, if we're going to be in business together, then this is the perspective that I have. I think that, just to take it back a second, you have two female CMOs of the biggest sports leagues in the world. Two of the biggest sports leagues in the world, right? Let's give it a go.
Dawn, you're bad.
We are bad.
And you never had that before. You never had women sitting in the C-suite running marketing that had the empathy to understand what was happening between the consumer perspective and the athlete's perspective, telling the CEO that we need to modify or change because this is going to happen with or without us.
Pam, do you feel like that's made being a woman and having more women in these kinds of roles creates more empathy in these situations? Do you agree with Steve?
I think any time a woman is in a role, it's better. Okay, let's start there. I also, come on guys, give it up for that. I'm kidding, I'm kidding a little bit, but I believe what helps here for Dawn and I are our previous brand experiences. That really helps me in the league. I've worked with big brands before coming here. Dawn's done the same thing. And we both worked with athletes before coming here. So it's not as much about being a woman as it is having had that brand experience to me. I think it always helps to be, for me, being a girl, absolutely. Being an African-American female, absolutely. I don't have any choice on either one of those two things. So it is always figured into what I do and the recommendations that I make and the way that I approach work. But I also know that previous brand experience and working with athletes has helped a lot in how I approach problems with this league.
Dawn, do you agree? Do you feel like, being a woman, you have a different perspective than your predecessor, your predecessor's predecessor?
Well, Pam and I do talk a lot about this, and I kind of give the same answer she did. And I'll talk about what I think helps as being a woman, but I think the biggest thing is that sports, by nature of it being a passion point, has a fairly low turnover in terms of people in the industry. So there's a lot of people in sports who have only done sports. And I think both she and I, coming from actually a sponsor's viewpoint, understanding the world of branding, understanding it through their lens, coming in just amplified the point of view, and I think caused us to maybe say, hey, there might be a different way to do this. And I view actually my voice was strongest just because I had alternate experiences versus it being a female voice. Now, having said that, I think in an interesting way, I find some of my most rewarding relationships, the relationships I have at the league with either former players or now talking more with current players, because I never was on the field. I'm clearly coming from a very different place. I didn't compete against them. There's just a really different space I come from, and I think it makes for a very genuine conversation. And I wanted to build on something Steve said that I see going on today, which is one of the reasons athletes have such power today is the digital social world, where they can get out there and talk about a point of view. But what that means for whether it's an individual brand associating with an athlete or it's a big brand like the NFL or the NBA, I believe is that you have to be true to your values. You cannot, maybe in the past a brand would affiliate with a certain musician or athlete and, the world wouldn't really know what was going on behind the scenes. Now it's totally transparent. And so there has to be a marriage of this is what I'm about, this is what my brand's about, and I think to Steve's point, the best partnerships between athletes and brands come from where it's extremely genuine, and there isn't a question about whether they stand together or not because their values are the same. It's when the values are different that these partnerships are formed where it's going to get rocky at some point.
And that brings me back to Misty Copeland and Under Armour.
Yeah.
Clearly, you had a difference of opinion in that brand-athlete relationship. Misty took to her social platforms and said that this is not what I believe, and there needs to be something needs to change. Something has got to give. How does something like that happen in today's world? And is that okay? Can your athlete have a difference? Can your athlete feel different? And have a different opinion than the CEO of a company they're endorsing?
You try to, as a CEO of a business, you want your political point of view to be personal. You want whoever you vote for, whoever you support, that's your personal opinion. You shouldn't necessarily run around and say, put the entire business on blast because of your political point of view. And that's exactly what, Kevin Plank did. So whether it was Steph Curry or Misty Copeland, they had to say, he believes that President Trump is an asset to the business. I personally don't. And that led to Kevin Plank backtracking publicly and releasing that statement, which, Under Armour still hasn't recovered from that debacle. I think it's important that, as a CEO, that you understand the distinction between your personal point of view and what you support, your religious beliefs, and those of the companies, because you represent thousands of employees and thousands of partners, and you can't put those partners in the way of your personal opinion. So that's exactly how that happens.
So how do you avoid that? I guess if you're just saying if you're a CEO, you don't publicly communicate your.
I don't think it would have been a problem. I mean, if Kevin Plank is going to raise money for the Republican Party, and whoever you vote for is your personal business, then it's fine. It's when you start trying to put the entire body of athletes and your team behind it, and they're like, we have nothing to do with this. You can't do that to me. And I'm sure there are many, many times that athletes in the past had to stand behind whatever their partner said because they were getting paid a lot of money and they just did it, which isn't necessarily the way things should be. I think that I don't care if you're an entrepreneur or not. We are all brands in this room. We are all individual brands. We all have to respect our brand values and not let somebody dictate those things for us. Once we have somebody else dictating those things for us, then we're out the game. And we're in a world today where your brand is all you got, right? That's your reputation. That's your resume. That's everything you stand for, your appearance. And you don't want anybody else to reflect that. You want to control that yourself. And I don't care how much somebody's paying you, they shouldn't be able to do that on your behalf.
So how do you know how not to take it too far, how not to take your social cause too far, to the point where you're creating an ad, that's just really only talking to a small group of people and polarizing an entire other group of people? How do you pick a cause? How do you pick a social cause without doing that? Pam.
Well, as a league, it's actually really simple for us. We have 3/4 of our players are African American. 1/4 of our players, of the 450 players, are born outside of the United States. all of those players have causes and ideas and things that they want to do. I'll take a very good example of this is what happened 2 years ago. We played our first game ever on the continent of Africa. And it was such an emotional thing. And it was so emotional because it was emotional for our players. I remember Chris Paul went as the lead for the world team. And I think it was Luol Deng that was lead for the Africa team. So it was Africa against the world. And both of those players were so emotional about playing on that continent, where so much of basketball has been revered, yet we have not played games there. And so we knew those players wanted to give back to their communities. We've given back to the communities in Africa for many years. We have an office there. And we just supported the same causes that the players supported. We not allowed them, but we encouraged them to do the things that they did. Dikembe built a hospital back in his homeland. That's what the players do. And as a league, we simply say, we're going to be supportive of that because we know that that's what you want. For us also, it's about kids playing the game of basketball. Basketball is so simple. It's the one game that you can play by yourself. I can play by myself. You need a ball and a basket. That's it. And you can play it around the world. And ours is a global sport, and it's growing around the world for that simple reason. You don't need an entire team. You don't need a field. You just need a basket and a ball. And so we are bringing kids into the game because we know if you put a basketball in the hands of a kid, they're likely to become a fan for life. And by the way, that's what our players are doing. They're going back home into their communities, teaching the game of basketball. So we support that as well. We have a very strong program called the Junior NBA, and that's what it's all about, teaching boys and girls how to play. So it's very, very natural for us to teach the game and to go back into the communities where our players grew up and to service those communities. It's real simple for us.
And you're promoting a sport at the end of the day. So
absolutely. You're supporting the playing of the game. So you're supporting teamwork for kids. You're supporting discipline for kids. You're supporting just doing this, not doing something bad. If they're playing basketball, they're not in the street doing something else. You're supporting a healthy lifestyle for those children.
It makes sense for leagues to promote these causes that support all these different facets of the sport of the organization. For a brand, is it more difficult to do that while trying to sell a product? How do you how do you bring athlete brand together to promote a cause, and not forget to sell cups of coffee and not forget to sell bottles of soda?
Hold on. I think that you can do good for the world and do good simultaneously. Yeah. I don't think you have to pick one or the other.
Is there a danger in going too far? Right now, it's all anyone's talking about. Brand purpose, brand purpose, brand purpose. Is there a danger, in forgetting that you're also selling products?
Well, yeah. When you're tone deaf, right? Like the Pepsi ad was obviously clearly tone deaf. I mean, if the point was to speak about diversity and inclusion, then we just remove the Pepsi can and cast better and we'll be into it.
You're not a Kendall Jenner fan?
You know what I'm saying? No, I'm not even talking about, you don't have to, I think this room is filled with creatives and marketers and brand side folks and Naomi Campbell. What happens is, you can actually talk about what you stand for and leave it at that and get the brand credit for that. You don't have to put the logo or the transaction at the end in order to squeeze it in at the buzzer. It doesn't mean anything. It hurts the point of your message. It looks like you were pandering. Yeah. And no one wants to be pandered to. So if you are going to do something that's supporting a cause or it's something that's topical in the world today, then make great creative work, articulate that point clearly, and you don't have to do the transaction in order to make it feel like it was worth the money spent. Just do it because you mean it. And brands need to have soul. Humans, we have to have a soul. As a brand, you have to have a soul. In today's world, if you do not have a soul, you are empty.
And
Over
so
and out.
what's the role of the league?
When Steve first started that answer, I was shaking my head, disagreeing with him, because I like to disagree with Steve.
What were you which part were you
But where I thought he was going is that you don't need that brand message, that you need that brand message to sell product. I believe the research says millennials and Gen Z fans, consumers, want to deal with brands that are doing great things. So I think brands should deliver those messages, as Steve said. What happens with brands these days is they say, I want to deliver that message, but then I have to put a product in there as well. So we're actually saying the exact same thing. You don't have to do that. And your audience wants to know first and foremost that you're a good company before they want to know what you're selling. And so I think that's the key.
How do you make the connection back to the brand?
You let them know where it's coming from.
The brand or the transaction? Because
The brand.
The brand is the easy thing to get done.
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to find a transaction in philanthropy, and that's wrong.
The transaction doesn't
just
have to
do
be
the right
right.
thing.
Do these work at the end? At the end of the day, are you gaining favor with consumers and selling more products? Have you seen results? Have any of you seen results? Be it through ticket sales or product sales?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Example.
Brands that do good first of all, let's just take Starbucks. Look, whether it be hiring 10,000 veterans or their point of view on refugees or open carry gun laws, like brands that do good, people feel good about them. And if you feel good about a brand and you're emotionally engaged in it, then you're going to transact with it. Like, that's just how it works. If you don't feel good about a brand and you feel like they're just selling you things and they don't stand for anything outside of just selling you something, you're not going to transact with it. There's too many options today. People are not held hostage and captivated to only buy from one channel or buy one thing. There's so many options. You can actually find the option that means well at the right price that you feel good about. In every single category, that choice exists.
What's the role of the leagues in brokering some of these deals between brands and athletes, if the leagues are indeed brokering any of those deals?
Between the athlete and the brand? Mm-hmm. I think that's on the athlete, actually.
Okay.
The athlete and the brand.
I think for the most part, our brands are trying to figure out what athletes connect with their audience and they think are copacetic, and they may think that maybe they're sort of usual suspects, so they may call us to say, is there anyone else we should consider? But in the end, they're making a decision based on who fits with their brand. And I did want to make a comment on, having been a brand manager for so many years, Pam said, millennials, it's really important to them that a brand have a point of view. And I would say they don't even have to necessarily 100% agree with that. It's just that the brand is true to that point of view. But just because a brand is a point of view which creates an emotional connection doesn't mean necessarily that if it doesn't make my hair function the way I want my hair, then I'm going to stop using something that doesn't work on my hair because I agree with their point of view. I may have a connection with that brand. So I think marketers have to both make sure that they're growing the brand as well as figure out how do they understand their target, deliver a product that's effective, use promotion to drive sale. It's not one-stop shopping anymore, and you don't have to have, an affiliation or a point of view and a cause do everything for you.
I'd love to talk a little bit about the changing nature of business. Anyone can sell anything online. Anyone can promote what they're selling, through their social channels. If they've got a big following, they can sell product. We saw this with Lonzo Ball. Player launched big baller brand, shoe brand, said I'm not going to endorse, a shoe brand. I'm going to launch my own shoe brand and sell shoes on my own and actually make money from this deal as opposed to just making money from promoting someone else's shoes. What does this do to the brand-athlete relationship? Are brands worried about this kind of thing? Are brands worried that they actually won't have athletes to endorse their products, the athletes they want to endorse their products?
The deals are changing. The deals are changing as they should. You're looking at talent who is saying, I want to monetize my influence in a much more transparent way, right? So I don't want to just get paid X amount of money and then show up 5 times a year. I want to get paid X, but I also want to get paid for what I do to actually drive sales. So I want to get a percentage of sales. I want to get an insight to the lift in sales that I provide. And if you don't give me that, then I will go direct to consumer.
Is that happening? Are they actually getting, paid more? Is it pay for performance where they're getting paid more in those endorsement deals if the brand sells more product? Are there deals like that?
No, what you're seeing now is deals where it's a flat fee with a blended opportunity for a percentage of sales over a certain amount. Yeah.
What is that? Is that percentage typically under 10%?
If I negotiated, it's more.
I think, too, you're talking about the 5% top athletes. I mean, there's a lot of athletes, too, that are forming relationships that aren't on the basis of that because they're at a different point in their career and they're trying to gain exposure and grow themselves. So I think you still have a very broad myriad.
Well,
I do see a little bit more that there are some cases where the athlete is partnering with a company to develop a line of products where that's a total profit sharing. They bring their visibility and their endorsement to the brand. They actually care about it and help make it a better brand. And then the company brings their marketing expertise and their distribution, and you can see some good success.
Is there more risk then, though? Because then you're really intertwined.
Yeah, well, let me give you one. Look, no one even talks about this. When Beats sold for $3 billion, nobody did the math on how much money LeBron made. LeBron took very little money going in and got piece of the company.
How much?
And piece of a piece of the company and piece of those power beats. Still gets paid to this day. LeBron has made a fortune of money from Beats by Dre as an owner and as a product partner in specifically that one SKU. So yes, these deals are changing quickly. And when you talk about risk, the risk is getting paid something, changing the brand dramatically, and not seeing any upside in it. Now, I'm a big believer in betting on yourself. So I think that with all the metrics out there, if you have this big social following, and you can tell that you can actually move a market. And if you know you can move a market, which is the reason why they want to do business with you anyway, you might as well get an opportunity to get a piece of the market that you moved.
Again, this shift in the balance of power, it's really interesting. Is there anything else new and different about the contracts between brands, athletes, or if the leagues are involved in any other way? I mean, is there anything new? And are they longer? Are they shorter? Are they, if they're endorsing product they're invested in, they're probably longer, right? I mean, is there anything else that's new this year compared to previous years about the contracts?
Yeah. On top of the actual endorsement deal or whatever that transaction, you're seeing the fact that they're using the artist as media. Like they want to buy the fans that's why they have to change everything on Instagram now. And you have to put sponsored on it because they basically was paying the athletes or paying the artists money to, which is essentially buying their media, buying their fans directly, but without paying Instagram or paying Facebook for it. So now the artists have to put sponsorship on it, which is a huge change because we used to call it product placement before, right? Mm-hmm. You would just see something and you see a product placement in it, but now the organic product placement moment is now called sponsored, and it has to be stated up front. That's, by the way, that's not a subtle change. That's a dramatic change. That's like, it's gonna shift the business dramatically because there was a lot of times consumers looked at items and they thought it was just straight editorial, and now they realize it's not editorial. The whole thing is a paid sponsorship disguised as, like you have fake news, it's like a fake editorials.
Wow. Hopefully people are following the rules and adding sponsored labels. So we don't have a lot of time left. I would love for each of you to paint a picture of brand athlete league relationships in 5 years or 50. Take your pick. Pam.
The brand and athlete.
The relationship between leagues, brands, and athletes.
Leagues, brands, and I think that you will see the smarter, more business-minded, more brand-oriented athletes continue to get the deals. I think you will see them having more control over what they want to do. I think the one piece that you didn't bring into that is the consumer or the fan in our case. The league, nor the brands, nor the athlete make it without the fans. The fans support us all, right? And so any offering from us or from the brand or from the athlete has to be authentic. And I think the athlete and brand that drives that authenticity the most will be the ones to win. I think the leagues will, because of social media, the leagues, the athletes, and the brands all have to do right all the time, or as much as they can, because they're going to be called out by fans if they don't. They're going to be called out by consumers if they don't, as they should. I think the spotlight that's on all of us now is because of social media, and those of us who, there are many of us who actually appreciate that, because it helps grow in our case, it helps grow our league. It certainly helps a lot of brands grow, and athletes who understand their brand, it helps them grow. Ours is a global brand. We have over 1.4 billion followers on social media. You can bet when the league does something, or an athlete does something, or a brand associated with the NBA does something, fans will call us out or they will support us. That's how it works. That's how it should work. So I think in 5 years, you're going to see more of that, and you're going to see it done even better than it's being done today. I think everybody's going to get sharper about it, but that fan is actually going to have more control of what they get to do and what they want to do in the process.
I'm going to answer just the world I know better about the NFL. What I think, and I'm not even going to think about 50 years from now. Hard enough to predict, trends 2 years from now. But I do think what you will see in 5 years from now is a much greater partnership between players in the NFL, because, when I worked at Frito-Lay, the product was a Dorito. Well, our product is the game on the field and the men who play it. And so they really are the product of football, and they want to have impact. And so I think you'll see more partnership going forward between the NFL and players, to the benefit of the fan, because the fan sees and they want to see the relationship between the league and the players, and they really very much follow the individual players. Now, in terms of a prediction, maybe this prediction, I think I see a difference even in the 2.5 years I've been at the NFL in the savviness of athletes at 22 years of age. I think people tell me, even 5 years ago, they come into the league and then maybe they kind of get smart about branding when they were 25 or 26. I think they're smart about branding now at 18 and 19, and they're coming into these leagues trying to figure out what their point of view is, and that the point of view and their brand is going to actually outlast their time on the field. And I see the opportunity today. Let's face it, the money goes to the top athletes to perform on the court, on the field. But I actually think there's an opportunity for a lot more athletes going forward, because they can all find their own voices. And, we see players with big social followings who aren't necessarily in the top roster on the teams now, but they're able to use social media to still use the platform and the visibility they have to have a point of view. So I think it's going to be a even greater time going forward for more athletes.
For the athletes.
Yeah. I agree with Dawn that the athletes coming in the game are starting to think about their brand early and post-career, post-playing days. So what am I setting this up for? They realize that the league is a vehicle to a new career, and not that they're not taking the league seriously. Of course, they want to be the best they can be, but they realize that there has to be something beyond that. We've seen too many stories of after their playing days are over, they end up broke or end up without the next solution. So I think that you're looking at younger athletes come in the game and thinking about that early on, which is a great thing. But I don't want to take for granted what we're doing here. And I was thinking about this leading up to this, this panel and coming in, having the privilege to sit on stage with these two wonderful women, that in the next 5 years, I think you're going to see a lot more women in power in sports. And I think women in power in sports is going to change the game dramatically. It's going to get much more fans in the funnel. I think we talked about empathy and understanding, and the business is run too much like inside baseball. It's just the same guys doing the same thing over and over and over again. And you need an outside point of view. So you need, whether it be African Americans in senior leadership or women in senior leadership like Dawn and Pam, I think in the next 5 years that sports will continue to grow because it's left in great hands of women leadership that's needed.
Good.
So that's how I feel.
Good. Thank you, everyone. I think we're out of time. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pam Eel, Dawn Hudson, the one and only Steve Stout. Extra special round of applause for Stevie. And Alex Bruel, many thanks indeed for hosting that conversation. You're a star. A legend. Fantastic. We're taking a short break now, ladies and gentlemen, back at 5 p.m. When we'll be hearing from Scott Galloway from L2 Inc., talking about the 2017 winners and losers in digital. See you soon.